This video is the second part of the first chapter of evolution called The Origin About an Idea of Origins. So in this video we're going to look at the role players in the development of the theory of evolution, as well as what kind of beliefs and ideas of the time gave rise to their belief in evolution. So this video will cover and explain the remainder of the SAG's questions as given in video number 1. So let's firstly look at how new scientific evidence is accepted by society. Now, every now and again, we see new scientific evidence being presented on social media, on the television, even in movies. They use it as a platform to promote this new scientific evidence. But how it really works, and this is very, very important, how the new scientific evidence is actually introduced or presented and how it's accepted by society is also going to impact how society believes it. Is it going to be believed or is it going to be rejected? Any new scientific evidence, idea or theory, and from the past or the present, will be judged based on, firstly, society's belief system. For example, think for a second how a new idea will be believed in a Muslim country by a Muslim population versus a Christian population or a population that's not really religious. The belief system of the people in that society is going to make that idea believable, or they're going to reject it. The actual historical time at which that new scientific evidence is presented also makes it believable or easily rejected. For example, if you think about how many people these days believe that the earth is flat, well, obviously very few. But if you think about some centuries ago, at that time, at that historical time, most people believed that the earth was indeed flat. So it would be quite unbelievable for somebody to randomly get up and say, hey, the earth is round. The manner in which new scientific evidence is presented and to whom it's presented is also very important. Now, with the technology that we have available to us these days, in most movies, they have computer animations which would bring alien figures to life. So most things can be computer generated into some believable videos. So people are very gullible these days and easily believe anything that they get told. A few years ago, there was a movie made called Prometheus. Very nice movie if you like science fiction. But in this movie, it's actually based on a scientific theory that believes that aliens came from some weird planet out there and planted their DNA on Earth. And that was the origin of humans on our planet. Now, before you laugh too loudly, the theory is called panspermia. And there are such a big group of people that believe this theory, that life on Earth originated from outer space, that they spend millions of rands, including making this movie. And obviously, this alien over here, which is apparently our ancestor from outer space, makes it more believable because of the way that it is presented, and obviously to whom it's presented, and the historical time which is presented. To bring it a little bit closer to home, we have learnt already in primary school about these bones called Lucy. That was found in Maripeng. Now, obviously, it's not a complete skeleton. It's just a partial skeleton, bits and pieces of bone. But scientists have presented this skeleton as proof that we have evolved from an ape-like creature similar to Lucy. Now, to make it more presentable, it doesn't help that they just show the skeleton or partial skeleton with the bones like these. So what they then do is they build a model, an artist impression of what this skeleton would have looked like. Now, I mean, if you look at this picture, and it's got hair and it's standing up, it's got a facial expression. If you take young kids or people that are naive and not knowing much better, and you now show them this and say, well, this is our human ancestor, it makes it way more believable. So let's look back at the role players historically that actually played a role and presented new scientific evidence in such a way to introduce the term or the belief in evolution. One of the first guys that wanted to explain how life originated was Erasmus Darwin. Now, don't confuse him with Charles, because Erasmus Darwin lived between 1731 and 1802, and he was the grandfather of Charles Darwin, the more well-known Darwin. So he believed that life originated from a single common ancestor. And this is because he said there are similarities between different organisms, which indicates that one species developed into another over time. Now, Alfred Wallace, living between 1823 and 1913, is a bit later than Erasmus. He was a naturalist or an explorer, a geographer. He's often referred to as the father of biogeography. Now, he kind of believed the same thing as Erasmus, but he thought the ancestors of all modern species became isolated from one another, and that made them change over time. But he couldn't explain why those changes happened. So both Erasmus, Charles's grandfather, and Alfred Wallace, the father of biogeography, had ideas that the similarities between organisms might show relation and change over time. But neither of these two men could actually explain why they say this or how this change happened. The two most important role players, however, that then try to explain why there's a relationship or why there was a change is John Baptiste Lamarck and then Charles Darwin. So Lamarck believed that the use or disuse of an organ may cause them to increase or decrease in size or even disappear. And he called this the law of use and disuse. So whatever a parent acquired in his lifetime, he could get his kids to inherit that characteristic. Now, the most famous picture that Lamarck used, or he drew this to explain this to people, is this one. He said the reason why giraffes got their long necks is because of this law of use and disuse. Originally, we only had a short-necked ancestor for all giraffes. And what they had to do is they had to keep stretching their necks intentionally to try and reach the higher leaves up on the tree. And they keep stretching. And obviously after many generations, the babies get born with these long necks. We know, however, genetically that's not possible. You can overuse a certain organ as much as you can. So imagine your dad going to the gym every day and developing a beautiful six-pack and great big muscles. It doesn't mean he's automatically going to have kids that don't have to go to the gym because they're inheriting those big muscles from dad. That would be really convenient though. So a more believable theory is the one that Charles Darwin came up with. Now, he lived between 1809 and 1882, and he's often called the father of evolution. So he didn't coin the term evolution, but he came up with a theory that he called the theory of natural selection. Now, according to his theory of natural selection, in a population, there are more offspring born than that is required to actually survive. There is variation amongst the individuals within the population, and then some individuals will have traits that make them a little bit better suited for that environment if the environment happens to change. So if there is a change, these specifically suited traits will allow those individuals with the traits that's suitable to survive. The surviving individuals are obviously more likely to reproduce. The weaker ones are going to die out and not reproduce. And that means that the babies that are born will inherit the characteristics from their surviving parents. In the next videos, we will pay more attention to the detail regarding the theory of natural selection. But for now, let's just do the last topic, which is really just bringing together this idea of who we are, where did we come from, why are we here, profound life questions asked by every person somewhere in their lives. So there's obviously more than one explanation where people try and explain the origin of life. And in that explanation of who am I and where did I come from and why am I here, people try to assign purpose to their existence. So besides the theory of Darwin, of natural selection and of evolution, there are 4 theories that we're quickly going to mention. And the IEB expects us to be aware that people have alternative theories to the theory of evolution. Now, one of these alternative theories is the theory of spontaneous generation. In other words, this believes that living organisms arise from non-living material. It's an ancient belief based on evidence visible to the naked eye. So things like maggots come out of nowhere. You have dead flesh, and the next moment there's some maggots. So that meant people thought, oh well, maybe just life just spontaneously starts up in certain places. Even if it does look like, to the naked eye, like maggots would arise just from dust, it still leaves us with a profound question of where did the dust come from in the first place? The theory of spontaneous generation was obviously discarded by this one. Louis Pasteur did some experiments and came up with this alternative explanation called biogenesis. And he said, no, living things has to come from other living things. So it was a counter-argument for spontaneous generation. In 1861, however, Louis Pasteur did some experiments to disprove spontaneous generation. He boiled some beef, and then he took some and left it in the open, and some others he put in sealed containers. And he realized that living things can only come from other living things. So it was a counter-argument for spontaneous generation, and he called this theory biogenesis. Interestingly enough, if biogenesis was the real explanation, we still don't know where did the first living thing come from. Now, already earlier I mentioned the theory of panspermia, the fact that they say life exists throughout the universe. It gets distributed by space dust and meteorites and asteroids and so on. But again, the question remains, if life originated somewhere else in space and not on Earth, where and who made the first life? There's still no explanation for that. The last theory would be creationism, a belief system that includes Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, Christians. So it's not a religion, it's a belief system whereby nature, universe, the earth, life, humans, everything around us that we see originated from some kind of supernatural act of a divine creator. Now, whichever one of these theories you believe in, we need to keep in mind that there's some factual evidence for it, but none of these can be proven in a laboratory, so they do all remain theories.